Good, good. All right, so we're going to split this topic off. I'm going to take Fedora and CentOS, and Dan's going to take Mint and something else. Arch. So Fedora, basically it's Red Hat Enterprise Linux beta version. And what that means is before any official feature is put into Red Hat Enterprise Linux, it is tested in Fedora for 4 full releases. And what better way to test new technology than to release it to the masses and let them break it. Fedora 25, you can download it in 3 different flavors: Workstation, Server, and Atomic. I had no idea there was this Atomic version.
What's Atomic?
Yeah, exactly. We'll get there in just a second. Description stolen straight from their website. I did not write this. Fedora Workstation is a polished, easy-to-use operating system for laptop, desktop computers with a complete set of tools for developers and makers of all kinds. Server is a powerful, flexible operating system that includes the best and latest data center technologies and puts you in control of all your infrastructure services. And finally, Atomic. Fedora Atomic provides the best platform for your Linux, Docker, Kubernets application stack. This is way out of the scope of tonight's topic. But you know, anybody want to volunteer to present on Atomic? Please let us know. I'd like to learn more about it and how to use it.
So is this supposed to be like a VM part of it, or?
Docker is an application. It's kind of like VMs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But it's Docker.
So you mentioned cubes earlier, so I didn't know if that was part of this thing.
No, cubes is with a cube.
Okay, so anyway.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows anything about this LDK stuff and wants to present, I'd like to hear it. So is there any confusion about Linux desktops and servers and blah, blah, blah? You can have a GUI with your, can you have a GUI with your server install? Well, yeah. All right, your choice of GNOME, KDE, XFCE, Cinnamon, and how many others? I don't know.
Enlightenment.
So much that it got saturated.
Exactly, yeah. Can you have a server with your workstation install? Yeah, you can install it. You can have your workstation and then install Apache, a web server, Nginx, MySQL, DB2, print server, file server, whatever you want on your workstation. So why do you have to choose between a workstation and a server? Well, the old cliche used to be, are you a sculptor or a molder? Meaning, do you start with this giant chunk and then whittle your way down? Or do you start with a little piece of clay and then build it up and build it up and build it up? So Red Hat started packaging their GUI and development tools in their workstation distros, and they packaged their enterprise server tools with no GUI or dev tools in their server releases. So that's the difference between the servers and the workstations. Any questions so far?
So the
What's the
workstation
missing
is
bullet?
What? Who?
What's your missing bullet?
That was just a space. I didn't remove it. Something back there?
So workstation just has a GUI and server is just a command line. That basically.
What tools come with it?
Oh.
The workstation has lots of workstation base install comes with development tools. The server distro does not. Yes.
In this instance, what's the difference between workstation, distro, and server release?
In this,
Yeah.
what I just said.
They started packaging their GUI and development tools in the workstation distro.
Workstation distro, right?
And they added their enterprise tools
No,
in the
that's
server release.
the server tool. The server has, the server has this enterprise server tools, but no GUI and no development tools.
Okay.
It's basically the default package allotment. As
So
far as I
same as
know,
workstation without GUI and dev tools.
all of each
Yep.
one of them have the same repository. It's just that the starter packages that you come with, server may not have GUI, whereas workstation will.
Got it.
The server may not have OpenOffice installed, but
Workstation like
workstation does.
somebody's computer.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Is either one by default more locked down, security-wise?
probably the server, because you would have less packages installed.
Well, funny you should mention that. Workstation by default does not have SSH installed. Server by default does. So, who knows? Workstation download. This is new with Fedora 25. It has this Fedora Media Writer program that you use. You install it. It's a small program. It installs on Windows, Mac, or Linux. And it downloads the image for you, and it writes it to a bootable thumb drive. Yeah. I did not do that. I just downloaded the live ISO file and ran it from there.
You ran it from the VirtualBox or you installed it?
Yeah, I run it through VirtualBox, at least on this computer. And they also have a 464 megabyte net install image. Like I said, I haven't had to use one of those since I got on broadband. If you still have dial-up modems, then net install images probably isn't a bad thing.
Pretty big still.
464
or if
megs
you're
over
bored.
dial-up is
Yeah.
That's still a good overnight.
That's
Yeah,
pretty much
exactly.
the entire installer. That's for the base packages.
Yeah.
That's 2 days of 56 gigs.
That's one of those where you double click the exe and it starts downloading for you.
All right, so installing this stuff, I did it under VirtualBox. For either server or for workstation, you want to give your workstation at least 2 gig of RAM. Give at least 10 gigabytes of hard drive space. I forgot to double check actually how much it used. But I think 10 is a good size for a workstation to start with. I always set my Ethernet device to bridged. That way I can SSH into it if I need to. If you set it up via NAT, you cannot SSH into your VM. And then set the CD-ROM to the ISO that you downloaded and boot it up.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes?
One of the, at my previous job, I saw, a lot of the cloud/Linux people were using Macs.
Mm-hmm.
And supposedly it was because they have a built-in SSH client. Is that something that
BSD.
Windows just doesn't have, or is that what PuTTY basically is for?
All right. Say the question one more time. Is that?
Is the reason that the people working on cloud, doing cloud support, cloud engineering, are using Macs because of the built-in SSH client?
I mean, you can use PuTTY via or on your Windows box. You can download PuTTY and install it. You
It
cannot.
seems
You
strange
usually
to
don't.
me that Mac would have a built-in SSH client, whereas Windows wouldn't, where you had to use something, honestly, that is
Mac is built on
cumbersome as hell as PuTTY.
I think we would agree that people that use Mac don't use it just because it has a SSH client.
Yeah.
An SSH client can be added to a Windows machine very easily. It's just a program. It's just a terminal program.
As somebody that's using a Mac now for my work, that's the only Mac that I have, my choices were Linux, Mac, and Windows. And because they locked down how you could do Linux so bad at work, it was really you had to use their particular Linux, and it was hard to get packages, and it was really archaic, and it failed a lot. So it was choice of Windows to be in appliance or Mac. Well, with a Mac, you have a native Unix environment. I can install things and use a terminal for literally everything that I want to do. It is cumbersome sometimes. Mac tries to stop you from doing a lot of stuff, but in a comfort environment, when you're talking about somebody that's a Linux user 90% of the time, it's much more comfortable because you can basically do everything in the shell, and the terminals that they have are a lot nicer than the ones Windows has. So I can do alpha blending, I can do multi screen, all kinds of stuff with the couple of terminal emulators that they have. I think I use iTerm, which isn't the default one. I use there's another program you can download, and it's very nice. It has, like, if you wanted to, you can do macros, you can do multiple windows in one window, you can do alpha blending, so you can actually see stuff behind the window, you can do nice colors and stuff. Whereas the Windows crowd just doesn't have anything like that.
Just more user-friendly?
I wouldn't say that.
No, I mean the Mac.
I wouldn't say that.
Well, because Mac is natively running off of BSD. Like the Mac operating system is just kind of like a GUI for BSD.
No, it is actually BSD. It's a real Unix. They're certified.
Just like Android.
Yeah, so it's,
Android is not BSD.
No, Android's Linux. But and so the shell is actually a real functional shell. Can't you also, like, for example, what Mac's native shell is which one?
All right, we're way off topic.
We're off topic. Pretty good.
We're out of scope.
Yeah, exactly, way out of scope. All right, so anyway, start Fedora workstation, tab up to the top one. It's going to prompt you to click this giant blue button in the middle. You can try out the live distro, or you can hit install to hard drive. All right, I opted to install from hard drive, or install to hard drive. It's going to ask you to select a language. I suggest English, but you know, if you want to be crazy, go for it. Try something else.
Simplified genuine.
All right, so this is the hardest part, maybe the hardest part of the whole thing. Select system up here where it says installation destination, and it says automatic partitioning is selected. You actually have to go in there and click the done button in the upper left-hand corner, and that will automatically configure partitioning for you. If you want to have it encrypt your hard drive, you can check the box underneath that says encrypt my data, and then it will prompt you for a passphrase to put in.
Using Luke's.
Using Luke's, yep. If you want to do this manually, you will click I will configure partitioning by yourself, and it will step you through the processes. I'm not going to go through that right now. I'm just going to say let it do itself. Right? So it will build its own boot partition, and then it will lay out the rest in an LVM partition. And if you choose do nothing, you will get this. And dev SDA1 is your boot partition, and dev SDA2 is everything else, and it's an LVM partition. Network and host name, lies. It's really only for the host name. And I think this just started in Fedora 25. If you click network and host name, no, wait, stop, go back. Yeah, you click network and host name, blue button there, and it will prompt you to enter a host name, and it will tell you, hey, you configure the network settings now from the GUI once it's already installed. Yep.
They used to have network stuff.
Yeah, they used to. Yep, I agree 100%. It used to be there.
Well, that's stupid.
So now you have to do it manually?
You do it via the little network icon.
Yeah.
Ah, right there.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Really. Now, maybe it did that because it already found that I was set up for DHCP and it got an address. But there was no option in network and host name on the Fedora 25 install to set up the network. And it tells you, use the GUI to do this. And then you hit begin install, lower right hand corner, and it does its thing. And then while it's installing, you set your root password and you add yourself a user. I said Rob and make this user an administrator. That lets you sudo. It's kind of important. If you want to change the user ID and add yourself to other groups, you can click the advanced button. I opted not to do that. And then click done. And the install will finish and tell you to reboot. So if you're using VirtualBox, eject the boot media and reboot/reset the VM. And then you log in as your new user. Yay!
And you can delete us.
So,
And then,
I have another question.
once it reboots, yes,
I somehow found a free training on CentOS
Okay.
on Udemy, and it just so happened that that's the version I was trying to learn. It had me create a profile like that, but every time I log in to actually do anything, it has me log in as root. Is that so I don't have to do sudo for everything?
if you log in as your user, then you should be able to sudo sudo --i in a terminal, and then you can become root. Or you can do a command as sudo --command, and it will prompt you for a password, and
Right.
it will run that command as root for that one time, right?
So there's really no reason to log in as root every time.
You should not log in as root hardly ever.
Thanks,
Unless you're using Kali. Unless you're using Kali.
thanks Udemy.
Yes, you should never log in as root.
What is Cully?
Kali?
Is
You have
a,
to ask, don't use it.
yeah, it's a penetration distro that has all sorts of basically hacking tools.
So you need to launch it.
Don't run it as your core OS.
Not interested.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Okay, so
did,
basically don't log in as root as I've been instructed to.
Right, correct, yes.
I ran,
You can log in as root for particular things, like Kali, everything runs as root. It's terribly insecure.
Mhm.
But, like, if you're recovering a system, log in as root, because you're trying to run things that you need to run as root.
So
But
the sudo
as
command
a-
gives you root privileges, right?
sudo is super user do, basically. And so you can become root using sudo, you can run things as root using sudo.
Yeah. Whereas you're not actually root, you're just a,
You just borrow
you're running admin privileges as a user. So.
Can you say what sudo what to do everything as root from there on?
Sudo --i, and then it will give you a root prompt.
Interactive.
Yeah,
Or you can do sudo
What is it? What is just SU?
as well. SU is
Just
switch
super
user.
user, right? What does it do?
Switches you to
Switch
root
user,
or
yeah.
switches you to SU --, whatever user you want to become.
Okay.
Like, so if you use that, you use sudo su dash, now you're root. If you want to go back to your user, be su user. You don't need to use
Okay, I
sudo.
understand.
Or you can just
Yeah,
exit.
root.
You can also use sudo to interactively do that too. You do sudo -u, the username -i, and it brings an interactive shell of that user.
Okay.
So after you boot up, it's going to prompt you once again, what language do you want to use? Not just install with, but this time actually use.
Oh, Rob, one thing. I want to mention this about sudo versus SU. They're not the same thing. SU allows you to switch user. Sudo, you can lock down to where a user can only run a particular command as root or as somebody else.
Virtual saying sudo. It's not necessarily.
Sorry.
And it's going to ask you what kind of keyboard you want. Do you want to have it locate you geographically, or do you want an automatically reporting problem, or automatically report problems, or problem reporting? And then,
Did you leave those on?
I think I did turn those on. I think they're off by default. I think I enabled both of those.
but it's anonymous reporting, so.
I don't care if they know where I am. It's a
VM.
VM.
Details directly to anonymous.
You need to set up, if you want to set up your Facebook account or Google Mail or whatever, this is where you do it. You click on the button and set all that stuff up for yourself.
Is that for Thunderbird or?
This is
Well-
not for Thunderbird.
Well, I mean for email. Sorry. But,
You know,
If
So I
your
see-
your Gmail, Google your Gmail account, yeah.
Facebook.
What next? Enable SSHD if you want to be able to remote into your new box. Systemctl enable SSHD, and then systemctl start SSHD. Apply any updates, no matter which version you download. There's There's gonna be updates for it,
Mhm.
200 and some odd, or 400 and some odd now, who knows?
Last time I did it was 303 megabytes. So was Debian.
So Fedora right now uses this new DNF. Doesn't use Yum anymore.
Really?
It uses DNF.
There is.
Don't ask me what DNF stands for. You can Google what does DNF stand for.
Did that
And
fine?
yeah, nobody really knows. I don't know why they called it DNF. So you do sudo DNF update -y, and it will go up and grab the latest and greatest repositories and update you.
This is for Red Hat?
This is for Red Hat. This is for, yes, Fedora.
Fedora,
Yep.
which is essentially everything.
I just tried it, didn't work.
Sudo is RPM here is Red Hat Package Manager. I think there is still Yum, like backwards compatibility.
Yes, you can still actually use Yum. Yum is actually installed.
Just, you know, just link to, you know?
It gives you a little warning that you should use DNF, but it'll let you use Yum.
Yeah, I think they're
Okay.
actually two different things.
Hold on. I just tried sudo DNF update -y, and it said DNF command not found.
Are you running Fedora?
No.
Or are you running,
Well-
what are you running?
CentOS.
Yeah, it's not gonna be on CentOS.
It's not on
yet.
CentOS yet.
Different brand.
CentOS is older than Fedora.
Fedora
this
is-
isn't out for CentOS.
Yeah, Fedora is the beta version.
You'll see this in CentOS 8 probably.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be in 4 releases of Fedora and be stable in 4 releases before it'll get
Before
pushed,
CentOS. Okay.
before it gets pushed to Red Hat.
So I would do sudo
Yum.
Yum update
update
-y.
F.
So when
Thankfully,
Fedora
they got the
27 comes out,
syntax the same.
Okay.
whatever CentOS you're using then,
Just wanted to
update
update
it.
Let's see, enable RPM Fusion.
There we go.
You can do that, RPM-IVH and blah, 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 blah. Yep, I like the Chrome browser. Firefox has some issues with Flash and all that stuff, so I use Chrome. It works great.
Just disable Flash.
Yeah. And once you get all that done, you can install it by DNF install Google Chrome stable -y, and you're good to go. Other stuff that's good to have, VLC, Vim. I guess if you're a Vim guy, I like VI, I don't care about the enhanced stuff.
Nano.
No nano.
Geo.
It sounds cool, Nano, you can just get your Nano each time, it sounds good.
I've used these for.
And I think that's just about it.
Yep.
Yes, that was it for Fedora. So, now I'm going to step you through really quickly. CentOS install. Okay?
What's yours between CentOS and Fedora?
CentOS?
Watch.
Sorry, I didn't
Look
hear
familiar?
myself.
Hey, where's my slides? No!
I'm watching.
No!
Where
No!
Where is it?
No!
Did you do RM? did you RM presentation?
Uh-oh.
Picture not found. Pictures.
Where'd they
RM,
go?
RM,
Were they on
Carrier.
the
You
SD
did
drive or
Libre
something?
Office?
Wildcard, JPEG, JPG.
Right click the picture, see if it's.
Did you move the direct?
Did you try turning it on and back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Disconnect the power for 30 seconds.
I had a really fun idea for the 20 group where we get a black box, put a Wi-Fi jammer in it, and tell everybody it's the internet.
Yeah.
And when you flip the switch off, it turns on the jammer.
All you gotta do is try to find Jen.
Like everybody's gonna lose internet. They're like, oh my god, I told you it's the internet. They're like, oh, quick.
Well, what a pile of crap. All right, so anyway.
So in short, use Debian.
Figures.
Does this look familiar?
The CentOS.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I was
It's
gonna
identical.
Say the Fedora, is it all pretty standard across Linux?
This GUI interface that you just saw for Fedora is exactly the same for CentOS. Every single slide that I just showed you before is exactly the same here.
Everything that for
Except
across
the
Linux.
network settings. That one shows up in here, and you would use that to set a static IP address.
To be honest, isn't this Fedora 20 we're showing?
It could very well be.
Right.
So,
The 7's a hybrid of 18 and 19, I think.
I don't remember.
It's-
I didn't look that up.
If you had a title.
Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. Oh, crap, no.
What is this? Is this
Go to
PowerPoint or Impress?
Hit normal.
Where's normal?
It's right
Next
in the middle.
where you hit
I think it was
slideshow.
LibreOffice, I think.
in the middle.
Down.
Down.
And
Above the slides.
Right.
4 over from
I
the
thought
one you
Impress
just
was
clicked.
LibreOffice.
You see where slide sorter is clicked?
Right in the
It's
middle.
the same
bar.
bar.
Right where you hit slideshow.
It's seriously.
Go down.
middle.
Let's go up there.
I don't know.
No, no. Right here.
Now you walk up there. I was like,
Wow.
okay, reach
So if I do this, no, I don't want to start from the first.
You should just be able to do slides on the,
Try to turn it off and back on.
is it F5?
F5 starts from this first slide.
Leave it.
Right click it.
Oh, right click it, right click it.
Oh, he's using the mouse.
Double click on the mini slide.
Click on a, it should work. There you go, and then start slide. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
All right, so,
Slide transition.
so anyway, after it install, let's see, you get to this slide, and it's installing, it's doing its thing. You can set your root password, add your user, and reboot, log in, test your network settings. Is there another slide of that? So, use yum to install your updates. Sudo yum install or yum update -y. And after that, you are done.
What does the -y mean?
Yes.
It just defaults to yes.
Good old yes.
For all the
It doesn't
questions.
give you a prompt.
Otherwise, it does, yeah, if you don't do the -y, it's going to
Oh, so it
say,
doesn't
do
ask for
you,
the prompt?
yeah, yep.
So if you have like a very long time where it's looking at all the repositories until I'm like, okay, we need this many files, do you want to install? So if like it
Skips
takes
all
5
that.
minutes to do that, if you do the tac yes, you can walk away and come
Right.
back and stuff.
Yeah, it skips all the command, all the acceptance prompts.
So I was reading, and apparently CentOS is basically just a ripped off version of Red Hat. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's the
It's,
Red Hat.
it's the. it's the-
Actually, Red Hat
Yeah,
owns the product.
I was gonna say,
Really?
Red Hat monetized what CentOS is built on.
So Fedora basically is unstable, and it just has all the new features coming out, and Red Hat is the more stable release after features in Fedora have been tested out.
Exactly.
Okay, understand.
And CentOS is Red Hat Linux without the support.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Free use commercially, right?
Yep, so it's the community
Version. of-
enterprise,
Yeah,
operating
Community
system.
Enterprise OS is what
Yep.
that's what it means.
All right, that was Fedora and CentOS, and can't believe that I lost my pictures. Ready, Dan?
Yep.
All right.
Everybody, give your hand to Robert.
So Dan is going to do a live presentation in the wild. Nothing could go wrong with that.
Never does.
We should have a prize. You completely get through a live presentation. You get like 3 beers.
Well, you could drink a beer every time the presentation doesn't work or something.
No, we should like,
Everyone
everyone should
shot.
get through a live presentation, you get your beers at the lunch for free. Everyone buys your beer.
Well, actually, that's the tradition, isn't it? That for the presenters, you give them a round of whatever they want.
I like this tradition. We should definitely start this.
That bang! I thought that was the case. Rob, you're the historian, am I right?
I'll tell you what.
Rob's like, no. Free
Yes,
drinks for the
I
people
like
at the
the tradition,
presentation?
and of course Ralph is buying, so. you
Not
guys-
today, no, not today.
Whoever proposed it,
Not today.
they better be dollar bills.
Power bills.
Okay, so
All around.
I'm going to be showing Ment and Arch.
Oh, yeah.
And so, first thing I'd like to do is show you the 4 versions of Mint.
Sounds like a Christmas song.
I can never get Cinnamon running on VirtualBox.
Really?
Yeah, I always had issues with it.
Install or update -1.
Oh my, I haven't seen Mint in a while. This is KDE Mint?
Is it different for
You got KDE Mint up there
Yeah.
too? Man, it's changed.
All right, so,
Go Plasma?
okay. All right, so here's the 4 versions of Mint. We have 4 distributions. They all share the same package repositories and everything. They just have different desktop systems built by default. Now I can take one of these and build the other desktop on it and use the other desktop. So if I have a Mint system already running and I'm running Cinnamon and I want to switch over to XFCE, I can. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
They're like, so for example, if you install the KDE desktop, your default text editor is going to be Cake, whereas with Cinnamon or Mate, it's going to be Pluma, and if you're using Gnome, it's going to be Jedit. So if you use a lot of different GUIs, like for example, I'm very partial to Jedit because I started with Gnome. So even I'm using Mate, but I still install Jedit with some of the Gnome packages, so I can use that. So just, that's, I guess, worth noting.
Yes, you can mix and match. So if you have a favorite package, you can certainly install it, even though you're not using the other thing as a primary. So I use Mousepad for mine because I'm XFCE user. And so if I'm using Mate, which is Gnome, I can use Mousepad. It just, the package manager takes care of the dependency hell and gets everything installed and I'm good to go. So first, we got this guy right here. This is what you see when you first stick a CD or USB drive in or whatever. You get just, it actually just defaults to 10 seconds and then starts, but if you hit any key, this is what you get. And Mint is actually a great little distro for being recovery because you also have the memory test and you can do an integrity check, which does an integrity check on the actual image that it's booting from. And so I'm just going to start this one, and it'll boot up and get into the same state that these other 3 are at. So I'm going to let this one boot up because this is the Cinnamon one.
Does the integrity check, does it just do a hash on the image, or?
It probably just does a SHA hash or something. I'm not sure how it does the integrity check because it's internal to it. So I don't know.
In the old days, it used to take a long time.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure it will. So this is KDE. It's not something I haven't seen KDE in probably like 8 years, but this is one way of them doing it. Now, one thing that you'll notice is Mint, Fedora, CentOS, Debian, Ubuntu, Arch are all going to have different experiences even if you're using the same desktop. So if you're running Arch and you install Mate, it's going to look different than you're going to look at from Ubuntu's standpoint, which is going to be different than Ment's standpoint, which is going to be different than Debian's standpoint, because they're all going to be customized in different ways. You're going to still have the same packages, maybe not the same age of packages, and so, you know, take this with a grain of salt. Mint has a distinctive look. They have a fairly clean look, and that's the way they do it. Whereas Mint and Ubuntu are going to look probably fairly similar, whereas Arch and Mint may not look anything the same with the same windowing system. So here, I really don't know much anything about KDE. This is the first time I've fired it up ever. And so you got your terminal, you got everything else. And you can use Mint live, just like you can do Fedora, just like you can do most of the other ones, not Arch. Actually, I don't know if there's a, what's that?
There's even live distros of Gentoo.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, that's, but it doesn't generally give you a GUI, I don't think.
You just. Pintu is a.
Well, that's not Gentoo. That's Gentoo.
Well, it's this Gentoo with Kali tools.
Right. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just a testing.
So you can see here, it's they default to console, KONSOLE. They're gonna have different applications for different things. So you got Firefox there, but like your file manager, this is Dolphin, whereas something else is going to use something else. All right, so that's KDE. over here we got Mate, which is Gnome 2. Gnome 2 was very popular. You can see the menu looks a lot different. My terminal is Mate terminal. And I actually like Mate a lot. It's a nice little distro, or it's a nice little desktop for everything.
I believe that's pronounced Monte,
What?
as in the T.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard of
It's
Monte.
they're all like cinnamon and mate. They're,
I've never heard it called
or-
Mate.
yeah. This is because I think for formatting reasons, they can't put the accent on the E.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Mate or Mate or whatever you'd like to pronounce it as is very similar to Cinnamon. So you can see that the menu is, they have kind of a theme going on. It's a bit different, but you have your places, your system stuff over here, and then on this one it's right here, and then there's a tiering system type of thing. But this is this is Gnome 3, and actually, I actually do not like Gnome 3's build. Like when people make Gnome 3 their desktop, it looks like Windows 8. It's hard to use. Whereas Cinnamon is a rebuild of Gnome 3 that has all the advantages of Gnome 3, like having the additional support for like all the fancy stuff, but it allows you to have like the traditional menuing system and everything like Gnome 2 did. And so that's why a lot of people like it. And you're going to have a lot of the similar programs here. So this is Gnome Terminal, which is what Mate is. It's Mate Terminal, but that just means it's Gnome Terminal.
Dan, can I show you something about the menu on Cinnamon that I think would be interesting for folks?
See, it's the same people. Yeah. Which one?
Go back to your menu on Cinnamon. There you go. Okay, now, right click, let's say go to videos.
Where do you?
Okay, go over one column, because the first column
Oh,
is
this thing.
category. Right click on it.
It's not doing anything.
Usually when you right click, well maybe they changed, is that 18.1?
Yes.
Okay, you should though, in 17, when you right click over any of those, when you right click, you're able to uninstall, you're able to put it on desktop, put it on, you can put that program, there you go.
Oh, well, that's because it was a place versus yeah.
Okay, well I can't.
So yeah, you can like add to panel, add to desktop, add
And
to
you can
favorites.
uninstall that
Yeah.
software as well.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And that is worth its weight because you don't have to go fooling around with it. You're gonna have to put your password in. But you wanna try something out, you wanna uninstall it, just right click on it and it's out of there completely.
Very nice.
What is worth noting that I've come across, depending on what GUI you're using, you really should know what packages are installed, whether it be Pluma or Kaja as your file browser or whatever. Because if something goes wrong, like I break things in very interesting ways, and I have to go command line to call up any of these things, if you don't know the name of them, like I'll be typing Nautilus, like package not found, like shit, what's the file browser? So just worth noting, I found.
So to install Linux Mint, it's pretty easy. It's just like Fedora for the most part. It looks a little bit different, but it's this menuing system. There's a little install Linux Mint here. Fedora gives you an option in the very beginning. You can also install when you're in the trial. So you can hit try, and then also like there should be a little like install Fedora, like it has on this for Mint. Linux Mint is based off of Ubuntu. They also have a Debian branch. Ubuntu is based off of Debian. So you're going to be using dpackage and debs and apt-get for all your package management and stuff, and we'll look at that in a second. So to install, continue, I need to so I need more space. That's unfortunate.
Quick question, Dan. With this install, Linux Mint in the past used to be a situation where they didn't have the drivers for the your router in with the distribution, the last time I messed with it, which was years ago. So they changed that, or do you still have to go ahead and plug in your computer directly by wire to install the network drivers?
Your Wi-Fi card? Well, I guess it just depends what Wi-Fi card you have. Like mine at home uses a Sky adapter, whereas some use the app 9K. But all the Debian distros I've used seem to all have all the ones they need for any Wi-Fi I come across.
But you didn't run into that problem, Dan, when you had to install it, like network drivers or anything?
Oh,
It was just
no,
smooth install?
Mate's pretty good about having, and this is what it looks like when it's first booting up, by the way, and then you can hit something else. Yeah, the drivers on Mate, the drivers on Cinnamon are pretty ubiquitous. But it depends on your system. It 100% depends on your system.
I have had issues with Network Manager where I use WPA something from CLI, which was a fun little endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Now you said Mate was based on Gnome?
Mate is based on Gnome 2.
2. I was gonna
Cinnamon
say-
is based on Gnome 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm looking at it, it says Gnome 3, and I was like, oh,
Right, because see, in
Let me look it up.
Ubuntu, and I believe Debian for a bit, when they moved to Gnome 3, most of the previous Gnome users were like, we don't want this. So
Yeah,
they had
that's what I thought was
no
weird, is Gnome
fallback.
2 looks more modern than Gnome 3.
Go look at real Gnome 3.
Instead of the Centos.
It's you don't have a GUI anymore. You
Interpretation.
just have like a windowing system that lets you type into it, and you have to find things
Yeah,
through.
isn't that also known as
So this is
Indian?
Centos'
Yeah.
interpretation of Gnome 3.
Yeah, they made
Vice versa.
a bunch of people didn't like Gnome 3, and so Gnome 3 actually lost, as far as I know, they lost a lot of the people. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people went to XFCE and stuff because they wanted a menuing system. They wouldn't get off of Gnome 2, and they said, "We're going to stop developing it. We're going to stop doing stuff." And so the Mint people actually built these two desktops. These are their desktops.
Yeah.
They're actually the main line for these software packages. And then everybody that uses Mate or Cinnamon are downstream from these guys.
So can you install either one of those on CentOS?
You can. You might have to like shoehorn it in there, but you can install anything
You can install
anywhere.
Once we get to
Well, yes,
shoehorn
It might be a terrible experience
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you.
I'm done.
For example, in just straight Debian, I found a repository out of on the University of Texas or whatever, where like I was looking through it, like, oh, Debian ISO with Mate, Debian ISO with Cinnamon, Debian ISO, and they built each one with a GUI innate in it, which I find to be much better because then you get like all the dependency issues are already resolved in the build.
No conflict.
Yeah,
And-
so.
I've actually switched over to, I'm a big fan of Debian, I'm a big fan of Gentoo. But for my little laptop here that I use day to day, and I just want it to work and it be pretty and really nice to use, so screw it, and I installed Mint. So I'm actually running Mint on this, and it runs great.
Mint is good. I like
Yeah.
it.
It's a nice operating system. They've done a really good job. This is what Ubuntu was supposed to be. But then they just like, we're going to do this thing. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, it used to be Ubuntu. I would install on people's computers that have never used Linux. Now it's Mint. Like I threw it on my ex's computer and like she picked it up. No problem, no questions.
Yeah, like people get confused with Ubuntu nowadays because it's just like they were supposed to be the like easy to use
Yeah,
Linux.
it's like the most well-known.
Yeah, and they just went out into left field. I don't know what the hell they were doing, but
Yeah, now
they
they're
did that
building
Unity
Windows.
thing, and Unity's terrible.
Right.
Delusion of grandeur.
And yeah, like, well, they didn't want to basically bow down to the Gnome people, and so they said, "Screw you, we're going to go do something else."
Wasn't it also too that they're moving to like, oh, we think all computers are going to go touchscreen at this point because a lot of the
Yeah, that's the same-
manufacturers have the touchscreens.
Well,
And
that's
then they
what
were thinking
they
about
were, they were
Ubuntu
thinking they were thinking that Mac was going to start doing that, where they were going to just basically say, "Here's iOS, enjoy." And Windows started pushing for that, so they're like, "This is the way," and that's the same thing the Gnome people did. So they're like, "This is the way everybody's going," and everybody that likes to use a desktop computer is like, "I like Windows 95. It works."
Yeah.
That's
I like
what everything
Windows
is based off of. If you look at every one of these things, they all exactly like, I don't know if OS 2 was like that or not, but
Right.
like, everything looks like Windows 95. Up
Yeah.
to now, that's like 30 years old.
Yeah.
It just works. It's a nice little, like,
Yeah.
you have the thing at the bottom, whatever. So let's go ahead and install this. So we got to get to Arch too. So to install it, pretty simple. I went and changed out disks, so now it's got a bigger disk now. You can erase the disk. You can install, encrypt the entire installation, which encrypts everything except for the boot partition. You can use LVM, which you can checkbox or not. By default, Fedora does use LVM. You can do something else, which you can do all your own custom stuff if you'd like. You hit install now, and it says, hey, I'm going to do this, which is what it's doing to the disks. Yeah, sure, that's great. You tell it where you are.
This is just for the time.
Yeah, it's the time zone.
Yeah.
And then English, great. You can also put in Cherokee. You can, Dan, let's call it,
Spent more time with these installation screens than I have using Linux. I break it so often.
I don't feel bad. When I first started, that's the way I was too. Like that's a great way of learning, especially when you have VMs. Because when I started,
Like
I kept
probably break
reinstalling my
every
laptop.
day. Every single day.
Yeah. So like I kept reinstalling my laptop because I'd be like, oh, let me do this. Wait, I can't get into the system anymore. Oh. Well, I guess I'm reinstalling.
The first time I ever tried to dual boot, I encrypted my boot partition, and I forgot the password because I did it at like 2 a.m. So I had to just wipe my whole hard drive.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, so Ubuntu used to, when you logged in, they would ask you for another passphrase for your hard drive if you encrypted it. And like I never did that. And even though it encrypted my hard drive and it just used the root password to encrypt it. But then I forgot the root password, or I changed it, and I forgot it, so I went and just did the single user login, which is a neat little trick if you forget your user password. And then allows you to log in as root, and then you can just change the user's password because you've got escalated privileges. And when I changed it back to the original one, somehow it forgot the shadow file or whatever of what the hard drive password was.
It's the Lux crypt, and it's actually stored in Lux.
This is actually.
This is before Lux.
Yes.
Ooh.
And it was SHA-256 encrypted.
Lux is nice.
I use that now. I mean, that's what I use on Cubes, because it comes with, it does Cubes for its main what they call the DOM OS or whatever, the base. It uses Fedora. They say it was arbitrarily chosen. So sorry.
We're kind of running low on time. We're actually at 8 o'clock now. So that's the install. The install's going on this guy. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of him. So this is the XFCE one. You can see this is what I usually use. It's pretty nice. You can change all the looks and everything if you want. If I wanted to install something, there is an install manager, so I can just go into. Let's see. I don't ever use it. There's software manager and then synaptic package manager, and so you can use a GUI to install stuff if you want to, or if you know what you want. Let's say I wanted to be root. So
This is without having to go into the terminal and do
well, this is the terminal.
apt-get or...
Yeah, app. Get,
Okay, so it takes you to,
install,
okay. I thought it was all
Chrome.
GUI based.
You can. That's what I was just saying. Well, there's no
Isn't
Chrome
there
package there,
also
but
apt alone now as a package manager?
I have no
They
idea.
call it
There's a bunch of
software.
package managers. There's also update manager, which automatically checks for updates and whatnot. So if we go to software manager, it says you want to be an administrator, so you type in your admin password, which is your user's password. And then I can, go and click like internet, and I want Filezilla.
So it's like an app store.
Yeah, it's an app store before app stores, but sure.
It's a repository.
Well, yeah, because
It's a repository browser.
Right.
Yeah,
But if I
Ubuntu
know
has
what
one.
if I can look up the stuff, so apt cache search Filezilla. Okay, so there's the packages and their descriptions, and so I want in Filezilla. and I don't want to sit there and like futz around with this thing. I know exactly what I want to do. I just do apt-get install Filezilla, and then it would install it.
Is there a way to like list all the different packages that you install using apt-get install?
It wouldn't be apt-get, it would be dpackage, because apt-get is a front end for the dpackage system.
I don't know what dpackage is.
It's the front end for the dpackage system. So dpackage is like RPM. So RPM is the Red Hat package manager, and Yum is a front end for RPM. And so what Yum does is it handles going out to the repositories, knowing what's around, revisioning and dependency trees. RPM, on the other hand, knows what it needs for a package, but it doesn't know how to get it. And so Yum, what it does is actually uses RPM to install stuff. It goes out, it fetches RPMs, it brings them back, and it uses the Red Hat package manager to install, extract, update, do all that kind of stuff. Same thing for Debian. Actually I think Debian's is older than RPM. I think Deb is actually older than RPM.
DPT goes out and looks for things for dpackage.
Yes. So dpackage is how you use, like in a low level, the package management system. But dpackage itself doesn't know how to go out for repositories and stuff. That's apt-get. So
if you want to download a program that's...
So there's all my packages.
So those are...
I did a dpackage list,
Oh,
pipe it into like less,
okay.
because less is more. And there's all the packages, the architecture, the version, and a description of every package that I have installed on the system.
Like for example, like Wire is a machine.
A lot of stuff.
And so
Nice to meet you.
it's on the
See you next
repository.
week.
Yeah, very well.
So you can't actually install Wire, but you can download the .deb, and you use dpackage -- install, and then you put in the name and location of the
So to show you guys a couple of, actually we can show that on the Arch one. So I want to show you mount and how to do a couple of things on the command line. And so we'll do that is with Arch. And I will be installing Arch using the Arch installation guide. All this, like the thing is Linux is not bad getting things going and getting things installed because all the information's out there on the internet. People have done it, people have been like, I need better documentation, and they've written it. And so, like, don't be afraid, use VMs. VirtualBox is amazing. There's a bunch of other VM softwares too, if VirtualBox isn't your thing. And like, just don't be afraid to get your feet wet, because when I first started playing with Linux, it was ridiculous. I probably reinstalled my machine like 20 times because I would break it in some way. I'd be like screwing around, like, oh, what happens if I do this? Oh.
Yeah, I had a desktop. I still to this day have an extra laptop that I just play around in, so I can run things bare metal.
Yeah, and
break them.
to be fair as well, VMs are great, but running things bare metal will teach you more. Because you're actually having to deal with the hardware. You're having to deal with like how to get wireless drivers working, how to get hardware acceleration. Like if you're really wanting to like learn Linux, install it on a laptop and then try to get games to play and not be terrible. Like
Is that the Linux School of Hard Knocks?
yeah, pretty much.
Mix.
So the installation guide is pretty straightforward. It's very verbose, so I'm going to basically kind of skip around on it, but I'm going to go straight down the side. I don't need to verify the boot mode. I know it's booted into a BIOS because I'm in a VM. If I'm connected to the network, I'm NATed through, so I'm already connected to the network. Cool. The way you can check that is ifconfig. Ifconfig. And so that's the default VirtualBox network config, which is 10.02.15. And then you can also do IP adder, which is the newer way of doing it, and it shows you the IP addresses and such. Then it wants you to update the clock. I don't really care. Then it wants you to partition the disks. So Arch is a lot like Gentoo. They're actually having you go through and build the system. So I'm going to partition the disk. So I'm going to do fdisk -L to see what disks I have. I have a dev SDA and I have a loop 0. The loop 0 is the ISO. Yeah, that's, yeah. So that's the ISO I'll boot it off of. And so I'm going to do fdisk dev SDA. That gives me control over this. If I hit M, I get a nice little menu, which is longer than my window. Pro tip, if you want to scroll up and down in terminal, and you're not in X or something, you can hit Shift and page up and page down. But if you ever do this, where you go to a different terminal, you hit Alt and F number, F1 through F7, and it'll take you to different terminals. See the TTY there is changing? Now if I go back to the first one, and I hit page up, doesn't do anything. And that's because the buffer is tied to the current running session, and when you change to a new session, it clears the buffer, and you don't have that anymore. So if you have something very important, keep that in mind. You can't go back up when you change those terminals. So here I want to hit P, which gives me my partition layout, which is currently nothing. I'm going to go ahead and hit O, gives me a new DOS label, N for a new partition, and it tells you how to do all, like you can, I'm sure there's actually a, yeah, to modify partition tables, use fdisk or parted, see partitioning for more information. So they have a little document on how to do all this, so don't feel bad if you can't just pick this straight up. If you have any questions, though, please let me know. So I'm going to go for partition 1.
Partition disk, never guess.
Oh yeah, you have to know what you're doing here.
Just like Discord.
So I'm going to say my first partition is going to be Linux. It's going to be 512 megs. I'm going to make a new partition. I'm just going to give it the rest because I don't really care about setting up swap. Look at my new partitions. I have 2 partitions. One's 100 it's 512 meg, or yeah, 512 meg, and the other one's 15.5 gig.
So one's going to be root partition and the other one's just going to be the root partition.
Right.
Why do you do that? Why do you make a separate partition for booting?
Boot partitions are important if you're doing LVM. You can't boot into an LVM directly. If you're doing encryption, you can't boot directly into encryption. If you are booting a certain sized disk, some BIOSes need a separate, like basically they can't count high enough. And so I think that was more the original reason, but it's majorly because of you need a boot partition for both LVM or encryption. So it's kind of just standard practice to do that for that. It prevents you from having issues later on.
And also if your LVM gets corrupted, your boot partition still can...
Well, it gets you to the grub and then you can't go anywhere else. But
Right, well, you can well, at least you can know if you have other partitions, you can get to them.
yeah.
So you look into the root order, so understand.
Yeah, and we can talk about that in the lush if you want. So you hit W to write up to the point where you write. This is a big difference between parted and fdisk. Fdisk, everything goes into memory, but is not written to disk until you write it. Parted writes everything to disk immediately. So you screw up in parted, you screwed up for real. You screw up in fdisk, quit. All right. Next, we're going to do. We're going to make file systems. So they want to run ext4. Great. So make fs.ext4, and if you want to see what file systems you currently are able to make, you can just do mkfs and you hit tab twice. It shows you all of the different ones. Now this one actually has it where it's like doing something weird, but a lot of times, most operating systems, it'll just list all the different options that you could do. And it's called bash autocompletion. So I'm going to do, and let's just say you don't, it's it's E something. Make FSE. All right, there you go. Now I have XFAT, X2, X3, X4, and X4 dev. So I'm going to do ext4, and I'm going to do my device, which is dev SDA1. Dev SDA1.
Is the ext4 standard, is that the standard file partitioning system?
It's the file system.
Yeah, file system.
There's partitions and then there's file systems.
Yeah, I know. I was
Okay.
just slipping.
So ext4 is one of the standard ones. It was ext3 that was the standard for a long time. Some people also use BTRFS. Some people use XFS, some people use ZFS, but ZFS is kind of wonky because it's not really in the kernel, it's kind of in the kernel.
BSD.
What does Windows use for its?
Windows uses
NTFS, yeah,
NTFS,
thanks.
right. And FAT and EXFAT.
Okay, yeah.
You can, they've gotten the kernel reverse engineered NTFS driver to where you can actually build your Linux system on NTFS. It'll be insane. Yes. I would suggest, some people just like, well, one of the reasons we would want to do that is, let's say you have a dual booting machine and you wanted to have Windows on one side and Linux on the other, and you wanted to maybe like primary your Linux box or something like that, and all your files and all this stuff was on Linux, you could mount the Linux drive in Windows if you were using NTFS.
Yeah, unless you want to add the X.
You can also do the same thing for Mac. It has support for Mac file system. Linux has support for every single file system that's known to man. It's ridiculous. Like if you want to run DOS file systems, it's got it. You want to run OS2 file systems, it's got it. You want to run mainframe ones, it's got it. It's got
Riser?
everything.
Yeah.
It's got COBOL.
It's what?
There's COBOL.
COBOL?
Yeah.
Cobalt?
COBOL, yeah.
You mean the?
Google's a programming.
That's a programming
Yeah.
language.
But it's, I'm just mentioning
Well,
that,
it's-
that's there, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got everything and COBOL.
So everything in the kitchen sink. So we'll go ahead and make our other file system. It's only 16 gigs, so it's real quick. If you're doing something like crazy like I do, where I have a 23 terabyte file server, file systems take a little bit longer to make. Like
And encryption.
long enough to make to go and like have a sandwich and come back. The encryption is also another thing. You can do layers and everything, but that's kind of out of the scope of this particular one. Arch, there are ways of encrypting Arch, but you have to do a lot to do that, and we're not going to go over that tonight.
This command that you did up before the one that you're at right now, it's
FS or FDisk?
no, it's mkfs.ext4. So it's make file system, and then it's saying ext4 is. The file
Yeah,
system.
it's actually an option to MKFS. So if I do like which MKFS? Here. Oh, that's an actual execute. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's an actual executable. All right. It's got 5 links though. It may actually be hard linked. I don't know. So NKFS is a program,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
usually
file system.
dot something else is just saying you're invoking that file system, or you're invoking the thing that makes that particular type of file system. And the same thing with mount, and there's a couple of different instances where they have those dot and something else. So next we're going to mount things. So we're going to mount our. We're actually not going to do it. They did that weird. Like usually you have /boot as your first partition. They built it as their second partition. That's very strange, Arch. So I'm doing it backwards from what they're doing. So I'm mount dev sd or a2 into mount. All right. So that if I type mount, it shows me all the mounts, which there's a whole bunch of them. But right at the bottom is the latest one, and you can see that's read write, which is great, and it's ext4, which is great, and it's mounted on mount. You can also do df-h and see that we have a little 16 gig partition there. Now I'm going to build a boot partition. So I'm going to make a directory, make dir mount boot, and I'm going to mount dev sda1 to mount boot. So now I mounted that boot partition there. Cool. Next, we don't really care to select the mirrors. They'll figure it out itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do pack strap. So pack strap, I like the little frowny face. Pack strap mount face. What this does is it actually goes and fetches everything, and installs the base system, which is basically this ISO. You can put other things in there. There is not only base. You can have packages or meta packages, which are bundles of packages. You can install those while you're installing the base system. But as a very base concept, you have just pack strap mount base. And it just goes, and you can see it's going through and just basically doing everything for us. We're not having to say, yes, proceed with installation or anything like that. It's just doing it. Now, that might take a little while. So we might just walk down the rest of this and be done. So configuring the system, FS tab. So the FS tab, I'll just show you on Mint. Okay, that's the FS tab. So the FS tab is what file systems are mounted at boot or are available for mount if they're not specified for at boot. Here we have it defined by UUIDs. You can also define it for the device path. The reason that you would want to do UUID versus a device path is UUID stays the same forever. The device path, however, can change. So if you have a desktop and you plug in your 400 gig drive, and later on you plug in a 300 gig drive, depending on how things are set up and like which SATA bus ID or like which PATA bus or whatever you're plugging into, the next time you boot that machine, you may end up with a different device ID for the drive that you're trying to boot from, which would be catastrophic when you're trying to boot the operating system. And so UUIDs basically null that out. They allow you to just say, find this device, and that's your boot device. You have a question?
Yeah, well, no, I was saying you can change the UUID.
Well, yes, you can change it, but
It's just not going to do it on its own.
right.
So.
And the UUID is a generated ID. They are fairly unique. They can be repeated, but it's extremely improbable. Just like MD5 hashes, you can you can have two images and they're the same MD5 hash, but they're not necessarily the same.
I mean, you have like a 1 in 25 million chance or something.
Right, it's very low. And if you take, like for an MD5 hash, if you do an MD5 hash and you look at the hashes and they're the same, and then you look at the sizes and they're the same, you can be fairly sure that it's the same image.
Or you can SHA.
Yeah, you would want to use SHA or SHA-256 or SHA-1 or something else to get a better knowledge of that. So that's what the file system tab does. Then you chroot, which is basically what that does is it chroots into the system. You're becoming inside of that system. So you're doing the devices, like your shell thinks that the system it's chrooted into is the root system. So when we mount it off a mount, if we chroot into it, now mount is now root. So if I cd /, I'm now logically in /mount, but if I do, pwd, it says you're at root, you're /. And that allows you to use the system tools and everything that are native to that particular system. So in this case, like let's say that I had a Gen 2 system I was trying to rescue, and I had a Mint key. I could plug the Mint key in. I can use chroot to chroot into the Gen 2 system, and then I can use all of the Gen 2 packages, the installer, the grub, everything that I would use on my native Gen 2 system is there and available for me to use, whereas I couldn't do that from the Mint system.
Okay, bring back memories.
It's good stuff. Time zone, you set the time zone by linking in a time zone thing. This is what the installers do for you generally automatically, but this is a manual installer. Hardware clock, if you want to tell it to sync up, you can tell it to sync up. locale generation, so you set your locale, so if you want to have a couple of different languages or anything like that, you set up the locale and you generate it. Keyboard layout, if you want something other than English US, then you can change that as well. Host name, Etsy host name, that's just whatever you want to call the box. You can also add it to Etsy host if you'd like to, but it's not strictly necessary. The network configuration is a whole bag of worms, and they have a whole separate page for that. And I would encourage you to read that, but it's getting kind of late for this one, so I'm just going to walk through this. Init RAM FS, it's not usually necessary, but you can go ahead and do it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Making it FS is necessary for things like encrypted roots and stuff. You have to have enough of the kernel to actually boot the encrypted root, and so you have to have init CPIO.
You have enough of it encrypted, unencrypted to the encrypted part.
You're basically taking a lot of the drivers and stuff and extrapolating them and putting them into the boot partition, as opposed to just having them in the mainline kernel, which sits in the root file system usually. And then you set your root password, so don't forget to do that, because you'll reboot and you're like, oh, and it'll be locked. So you'll have to reboot back, and then you'll have to chroot and change your password, or manually change the shadow file, or whatever you want to do. You set up your bootloader, which is another thing that you don't have to do on any of the other ones, is you're going to set up grub, or system deboot, whatever that is. And that basically what it does is grub actually has two loaders. It's got one in the MBR, which loads the initial package, and then that basically says grub 2 is, or grub layer 2 is over here, and it points at the boot partition, and that was
Weird.
must have been a power flicker. That's all right. So you would set up grub would point at your kernel and your boot partition, and then you go on and on. And then you reboot and you're done. And then for adding and removing packages, now Arch is not going to have a GUI when you start, unless you tell it to have a GUI. Arch is going to give you terminal, and that's it. You need to install your GUI and install everything and use Pacman for that. Pacman is the package manager for Arch.
It's incredible.
It's fun.
A little better than eMerge.
I like eMerge.
I do too, until you start getting
Blocking.
well that and conflicts.
Yeah. The most harrowing thing for you to emerge is when bash is blocking what you're trying to install. And so you have to unmerge bash while you're running bash, and then merge what you're trying to do, and then remerge bash, and hope your system doesn't crash while you don't have a shell. Because you're running the shell in the RAM.
Right.
So that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I shouldn't have closed that desktop before I asked that.
Yeah, can I get 2 minutes back on the projector?
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
When you're switching terminals and it gets rid of your buffer memory, does it also get rid of your history?
No, the history is distinct from the
buffer.
the buffer. So the buffer is something that's in the TTY, whereas the history is part of whatever shell you're running, and in most cases nowadays it's bash. So the history is,
Still there.
yeah, it's going to be still there. Now,
However, multiple tabs though.
yeah, so if let's say I log in here, and I do, echo, whatever, and then I go back to this tab and I come back, it's there. Now, it only commits when you exit the shell. And so if I actually didn't want anybody to know what I was doing, I could just, if I do env and put that in the list, there's all these environment variables that are part of my shell. There's my path, there's, log name, all these things in here. One of them is hist file. Let's see, where is he? Hist file. Okay, so there's my hist file. So I'm actually running ZSH, okay. And so what I can do is I can actually just say, well,
That variable name is very suggestive.
yeah. But you can actually unset the history file or like echo something else into it, and it'll prevent it from saving it when you exit.
Send to dev null.
Eh. Yep. Any other questions?
Found out on Wikipedia what DNF is.
Ooh, what is it?
You'll like this. It's called Dandified Young.
It's acronyms on acronyms here.
I thought it was something else, but again, suggestive.
Dandified.
Did not finish. I like it.
Yeah, that's what I was
All right, well, I'm gonna steal the projector
Yep, go for
for a
it.
minute.
Good to go. Did you find your slides?
There we go. All right, where's my mouse?
Oh, found a cat.
Oh dear God.
Found the pictures lost in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, in the few files you install, or the few packages, average is always a good one to make sure you have enough entropy for any encryption you're using.
There you go.
So, when you install CentOS minimal, this is the default screen you get, and you select install CentOS instead of install Fedora. That's why it says, does this look familiar? Yeah, select your language. Look familiar?
Exact, looks like it, yeah.
It's because it's the exact same installer. It works great in Fedora, therefore once it's proven in 4 releases, they use it in Red Hat. Here I selected a 4 gigabyte hard drive because when you're installing server version, that's really all you need. And I told it to do automatic partition.
Mint needed 13 gigs.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. In CentOS, you actually use the network setup to set up your network. Unlike Fedora, which told you to use the GUI. If this is a server, you better use a static IP address, not DHCP. And you use the IPv4 settings tab in there to do it. And then it starts its package install, and you set your root user or your root password, and you create your user. Reboot and test your network. Looks exactly like the Fedora install. Cool. That's it.
All
Wish
right.
it would have worked that way from the beginning.